Hey everybody, it's Scott Steen with winnersandwhiners.com coming to you with our fifth video in our video series. We finished up the NFC, and we're now going to start with the AFC, taking a look at the AFC North division by division. We're going to take a look at the win totals here with two of my all-time favorite people to do radio and or videos with. We're going to start with our guest today. He said, if you started off listening to me in the old podcast days, he was a frequent guest. In fact, we did NFL Fridays, one of my favorite things, and one of my favorite people. He's down there in Atlanta, Georgia. He is the boss down there at offshoreinsider.com. He is the one, the only, Joe Duffy. Joe, welcome to the show. How are you today, sir?
Well, thank you, Scott. No, it's confusing. It's offshoreinsiders.com, but I do have Offshore Insider as my Twitter handle because of the limited characters. But no, it's doing fantastic. I'm very happy to talk to you. Again, not much has happened, I guess, in the world since the last time we spoke, though, right?
Pretty slow, just kind of business as usual. And Joe, I know you're a big foodie. I know on your personal Twitter you post a lot of restaurant reviews. So this has to be kind of a double whammy for you down there. Not only are there no sports, but there are no restaurants either. That's quite a 1-2 punch, my friend.
Yeah, Scott, my total income is betting on sports and selling sports picks. So I'm literally unemployed for the first time in my life. And my side gig doesn't pay all that much. But yeah, I am a big time food snob. I do some writing for one website and another newspaper that also has a corresponding website. And of course, restaurants and sports, two of the industries that have been most affected by this. So yeah, my life has changed in so many ways.
Yeah, I can totally relate to that. Obviously, my main gig was betting on sports and handicapping sports as well. My side hustle is a gigolo, so that's not going very well either with social distancing. So yes, I think we can all relate. And Scott, we're gonna bring in the one only Scott Reichel, our friend over there at StatSalt and winnersandwhiners.com. Scotty, what's your side gig? What do you got going? You still doing okay?
Yeah, can't really complain. I've been posting some poker results on my Twitter, mostly tournaments on some offshore sites. Been working out pretty well. Can't really complain. Other than that, I told you before we started, I'm trying to get more into some movies that I've missed over the years, mostly before I was born. And plan on watching Heat with Robert De Niro and Al Pacino probably after this at some point, just because I got a weakness for both actors and then also for very good robbery movies. So I feel like that's kind of a perfect fit. So,
I feel I really wasted a good one. At the end of 2019, I made a commitment. I was talking with my son, and I made it through every one of the Marvel movies. And I'm thinking, man, what a great opportunity that would have been for right now had I not just seen all 20 of them or whatever. So,
well, you shouldn't apologize for getting done with your promise as quickly as possible. So I feel like you should take credit. You should look at the positive there because you could have easily pushed it off, but you actually went through it.
That's right.
So,
the one time I follow through.
The one time it comes back to bite you. It happens.
Well, gentlemen, we're going to proceed as if there's going to be a football season this year. And our president has certainly inspired us with confidence as he came out and said he would like to see the NFL and college start on time. Gavin Newsom, governor of California, said, not so fast. I don't see that happening. So, you know what? We'll just have to see what happens. We'll have to see how well we've flattened the curve, a phrase none of us knew 30 days ago, but I digress. Let's plow ahead. And speaking of plowing ahead, the Baltimore Ravens absolutely plowed through the NFC North last season. They've got their win total set at 11.5 with 115 juice to the under on BetOnline after finishing 14-2 a year ago. Let's start with Joe. Joe, do you see a repeat for the Birds of Baltimore?
Now, Scott, one of these things that I do when a quarterback is coming off a career year, which Lamar Jackson obviously is, one of the great years in recent NFL history, unless they have the track record of, say, Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers or a Tom Brady, you almost definitely have to bet on regression. So I do think that Lamar Jackson, you almost got to think that he's going to go down a little bit, and he's not necessarily, say, the passer that Pat Mahomes is. Mahomes is a guy who was able to follow up a spectacular year with an even better year, other than, of course, getting hurt there in the middle of the year. So I do think there's going to be a little regression there. They do have several pending free agents on defense, so they hopefully got to re-sign them from Judon, Pierce, Smith, Carr, and they really do need to shore up that defense. But if they can re-sign most of their free agents, that'll obviously help. They do need some help on the pass rush. Offensive line is weak. They do need another wide receiver to complement Marquise Brown. Though the draft is very deep at wide receiver, we're, of course, recording this before the NFL draft takes place, so there's a great opportunity for them to really improve on that weakness. But all in all, look, I know how important it is as far as offensive line and defense, but I always take a look at guys that touch the ball first. They're deep at running back, but the biggest question is, I mean, you got to have a command performance. Can Lamar Jackson repeat last year? That's going to be a little bit tough. Not that I think he's going to be a thorough bust, but a lot of things went right for Baltimore. I do look for a little regression. If you made me have to pick a division winner, of course I would go with them. But as far as the odds are concerned, no, I don't think they're the best value. But we'll talk about that more later.
So what about 11.5? Do you see them topping that total? And they've got their home schedule. They're playing the AFC South, and they're playing the NFC East. So they've got the Jags and Titans at home, the Cowboys and Giants at home. And their first place matchup that they're going to play at home is with the world champion Kansas City Chiefs. They're away playing the other two teams there in the South, Colts, Texans, the other two teams in the East, Skins and Eagles. And their first place road matchup is the Patriots. So if their home schedule, like I said, that's pretty weak with the Jags, Titans, Cowboys, Giants, and Chiefs. Let's figure they go 4-1 there on the road, 3-2. That makes them 5-1 is what they need to get to 12 in the division. Do they just about run the table, go 5-1 there into the division, Joe? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, the Chiefs are going to be tough to say the least. And the Cowboys, you never know when they're going to finally have their breakout year. But that's, of course, they got Mike McCarthy there. I always say that when handicapping teams wins, it's so tough to truly, in advance, look at the strength of schedule. I always like to look at the team relative to last year and this year. Do they have an upside, a downside? All in all, as far as 11.5, I think the under is a pretty safe bet.
Very good. And Scott, the Ravens have tried to address some of their problems there on the defensive side of the ball. They signed Calais Campbell from Jacksonville 2 years, gave him $20 million guaranteed. They signed Derek Wolfe, kind of a grinder there out of Denver, played for the Broncos for all 8 years of his career. Tried to get Brockers out of Los Angeles. He failed the physical. They did franchise Matt Judon, so we'll have to see how that goes, whether they actually sign and trade him or they keep him as their edge rusher. Scott, what do you think about the Baltimore Ravens?
Well, first of all, DraftKings does have the Ravens over at 11, so you do pick up half a game if you are considering taking the over. For me, I do understand Joe's point, especially after Lamar Jackson had one of the best quarterback seasons of all time. It's natural to think there will be some regression with the added film. And just I think the point that the Ravens had was that they caught everybody off guard with their system and how nobody really knew what they were going to do offensively. And now you have a full offseason where coaches can actually prepare some game plan based on film to try to counter it. However, I still think that they are just the best team in the division by far. You mentioned the schedule in itself. And Baltimore, people were talking about how bad the Hopkins trade was for the Texans and how that was an ultimate fleecing by Arizona. I think that Calais Campbell trade is a fleecing and a half as well that people aren't talking about. He's an unbelievable interior defensive lineman. I know he's getting a bit older, but Baltimore got exposed a little bit in the trenches in that playoff game against Tennessee, and picking him up was definitely a very solid addition for them. I do think that they will not go 14-2 again because that's pretty much unheard of, but I do think they should be able to win at least 11, 12 games. And with the number being available at 11 on DraftKings at -115 to the over, I'm personally leaning to the over. I think they'll go 12-4.
I think that feels right to me. I see him. I just see him going 4-1. I don't see him being. They're going to probably lose to the Chiefs or the Cowboys. But I think that's probably going to be it as far as their home games go. And Joe is right. It is very difficult to cap, especially like we talked about before the draft happens. I'm going to give a slight lean to the over just based on who they're matching up with and the rest of the talent there in the division. And speaking of the rest of the division, let's take a look at one of the more surprising teams, especially after Big Ben went down, as the Pittsburgh Steelers ended up finishing second in their division. Their win total has been set at 9.5 at BetOnline, once again juiced to the under at -120. Steelers did finish up 8-8 a year ago. As far as their moves go, they franchised their defensive end Bud Dupree. They brought in Eric Ebron from the Colts to play tight end. They brought in Chris Wormley from the Ravens. Nothing that's made a nothing that's made a huge splash. They did make Derek Watt the highest paid fullback in the NFL. But Scott, what do you see happening with the Steelers here? Do they have any kind of do they have anything for Baltimore? Any kind of run they can make?
Well, first of all, I'm just going to announce specifically this Pittsburgh Steelers win total. I'm social distancing myself from this bet. I have no interest at all. I feel like you can break down the roster and all the moves that they've made as much as possible, but the win total is solely going to come down to which Ben Roethlisberger you're going to see. The main reason why this team underachieved last year was based on the lack of weapons in the receiving corps at the beginning of the year, along with the massive injury that Ben Roethlisberger suffered. And you had to throw out Mason Rudolph and Duck Hodges for pretty much the entire season. I think we can all agree that they aren't exactly quality quarterback depth for the team. I'm a little bit skeptical on Roethlisberger personally, off of a serious arm injury and off of just a ton of injuries over the course of his career. The defense, of course, is fantastic. Ever since Fitzpatrick got there, he was unbelievable. T.J. Watt's been really good. Dupree's been very good. If I had to lean anywhere, I guess I would slightly lean to the over 9 on DraftKings, but I'm not touching this. It really comes down to what Roethlisberger you think is going to show up. And until I actually see some footage of him playing, I'm not going to touch this thing. So it's a pass for me.
Very good. Joe, what do you think about the Steelers? And in particular, how do you feel about the Steelers' running game? Are they going to have a sufficient running game and have enough weapons there on offense, even if Big Ben does return to form? Are they going to be able to make any noise at all on the offensive side of the ball?
You know, everything that Scott said is very true. It's tough to disagree with anything he said. The Steelers are without question one of the biggest question marks in the NFL. As far as the running game, look, they have a very aging offensive line. So they are a team that has plenty of question marks there. I got to give Mike Tomlin credit. I was one of his critics a couple years ago when I said that Tomlin didn't do a very good job. I felt they underachieved with the triplets. Now with the advantage of 2020 hindsight, looks like he was about the only person who could really handle Antonio Brown. And now all of a sudden, with all the injuries last year, they were a very impressive 8-8 team. As you said, Eric Ebron was a great addition. Ben Roethlisberger loves to work with tight ends. He works with tight ends quite well. They do need someone other than Juju Smith-Schuster as a weapon. But as I said before, it is a pretty deep draft when it comes to wide receiver. And keep in mind, despite the fact that Pittsburgh was a surprise last year, they even had a few close losses. So their record could have been better. But like Scott, I'm kind of afraid of this. It really does depend on Big Ben. Big Ben could be one of the top 5 quarterbacks in the NFL, or he could be done, or he could be somebody who's going to spend most of the year on the injured list. Because of those question marks, I would say I would definitely go under. I just don't think Ben can make it through an entire season. I think Ben's days of being a top 5 quarterback are likely done.
Yeah, I agree with that. And taking a look at their schedule, they, of course, again play the AFC South and the NFC East. Their 2 second-place games are the Broncos at home and the Titans, and the Bills on the road. I don't see them doing much better than 5-5 out of those 10 non-divisional games, which leads them having to go 5-1 in the AFC North. That means they have to run the table against the weak sisters and split against Baltimore. I don't see it. I don't see them getting to 10 wins. It's possible they could land on 9. So if you want to play the under, I definitely would advise to shop on your lines. Like I said, we've got Bet Online at 9.5. DraftKings has it at 9. I think it's possible they get to 9, but I think it's highly unlikely they get any higher than that. I'm going to officially take the under 9.5 on the
just there. One point. I also agree with the under 9.5, but I was just saying based on the actual line on DraftKings, I think you have to lean to the over 9. But if you can get 9.5, I would take it also. I think this team will land on 9-7 personally. Just to touch upon what Joe said, how there's a lot of uncertainty with Big Ben. I'm kind of in the skeptical pool, thinking that he's a little bit over the hill at this point, if not completely done. Even if you've looked at him the last couple of years when he was healthy, his turnovers have constantly gone up. He has continued to showcase his gunslinger mentality, and you have to wonder how much that'll come back to bite him, kind of like Favre at the end of his career. Once you lose the arm strength, but you still believe you can fit it into these impossible windows, your turnovers will continue to climb up. And I personally think Big Ben is probably in the same boat as Phillip Rivers, so to speak. So at this stage in their career. So for me, I think Big Ben's probably done, but I think he probably has a little bit more left in the tank than a Phillip Rivers, so to speak.
So here's kind of an off-topic question. I'll give it to both of you guys real quick. Between Roethlisberger, Brady, and Phillip Rivers, do any of those guys suit up for 2021, Scott?
I'm going Brady, personally.
You think Brady will be the last man standing?
He signed a 2-year contract worth about $50 million guaranteed. I think he's going to stay it out for those 2 years.
Joe, what do you think?
Well, the funny thing is, I've never been a Phillip Rivers fan ever, but I do think he's the one who's probably in the best physical shape. Brady last year showed some signs of finally being on the downside of his career. In the case of Rivers, like I said, I never really thought he was all that great to begin with, but I do think that Rivers physically probably has the most left in the tank. So I would say that Rivers will be the last man standing of those three.
I think Brady's like, 65? Didn't he play at Michigan with Gerald Ford? I'm not sure. I think Gerald Ford was his center when Brady was at Michigan.
Well, Joe mentioned that Brady lost a step. Forget about losing a step. He actually looked human last year after an entire career of him basically aging. I don't even understand how that really works. He kind of aged like Arnold Schwarzenegger in The Terminator. He kind of just looked the same for the last 20-something years. But, I agree that Rivers might have the most left in the tank for the three. But if you're just talking about 2021, Brady as of right now is locked into a $50 million guaranteed deal. So I think he kind of has to be back next year, barring a serious injury. So that was just my thought process on that.
You and I might have a little side action on whether Brady sees the field.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. I know what Brady's secret is. If you can get, a couple models to be affectionate to you, you'll stay young forever.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I don't have the resources to confirm that, but that probably helps. I'll tell you that much.
I don't know from experience, but I'm very confident that if you could get that deal, it's going to keep you young forever.
I've been rejected by model trains, so I obviously can't speak to that at all. You know what? All right, let's take a look. It only gets better from here, guys. Let's take a look at one of the most disappointing, at least on paper. There was a lot of hype with this team last year for no apparent reason going into the season. Let's take a look at the Cleveland Browns. 8.5 is their win total. Once again, it's the theme for the division. It is juiced to the under at -115. The Browns finished a disappointing 6-10 last year. Of course, they did what the Browns always do, which is fire their coach during or at the end of the first season. They brought in new head coach, ex-offensive coordinator of the Minnesota Vikings, Kevin Stefanski. Sorry about that, all you my Polish listeners. Kevin Stefanski from the Minnesota Vikings. Is any hope for the Browns here at all? They've made a few moves. They've bolstered their defensive backfield. They brought in a fullback, which I know Stefanski likes to run. They brought in Andy Janovich from the Denver Broncos, traded a 7th rounder for him. They tendered Kareem Hunt, put a 2nd-round tender on him to bring back the two-headed monster there in the backfield with Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. Joe, what do you think? Any hope for the Browns? Any hope for the Browns fans out there?
Well, Scott, in some respects, you stole my thunder. We have to remember this time last year, the Browns were like the overwhelming chic team. And I heard quite a few sportsbook directors quoted as saying if the Browns had won the Super Bowl last year, they were going to take a bath. They were, of course, the biggest disappointment. And you'll probably notice a theme here where the surprises like Baltimore, I expect them to regress. And, of course, the disappointments like Cleveland, I think they're the teams that have the biggest upside. The blatantly obvious thing, Baker Mayfield. Look, this guy showed flashes his rookie year. He's got that quick release. His problem is he's not the most humble guy. He did say some of the right things during the offseason, ate a little bit of humble pie. But then again, I've heard that in the past from Johnny Manziel, and that didn't work out all that well. But you mentioned he's got great weapons. You talked about the great 1-2 punch at running back. Remember, one of the biggest offseason signings was Austin Hooper. So with David Njoku, that's a great 1-2 punch at tight end. Why is that even extra important for the Cleveland Browns? Because they're safety valves. You've got 2 good options at tight end. That's where maybe Mayfield could build up some confidence and be able to, use that confidence to throw downfield a little bit more often. Also keep the defenses honest. Hopefully Myles Garrett for them will keep his head on, so to speak, and he'll be with them the entire year. There's no shortage of weapons there in Cleveland. And look, with Stefanski, change sometimes for the sake of change is good. it still all comes down to, they're very talented but erratic quarterback. And if he can finally get it, and the fact that they added a nice tight end weapon for the reasons I stated is big, I think they're the over. And I think now that, they were everyone's dark horse team last year and they're not this year, I think they might be a pretty good dark horse team.
All right, so you officially have them then at over 8.5?
Yes.
You think they'll have a winning season? All right, very
Yes,
good.
sir. Yes, sir.
Scott, what do you say, bud?
I agree with Joe on the DraftKings actually has over 8 at -110, so I actually like that line a lot better with the half a game. You mentioned a lot about the weapons, and I agree, but I think one of the most underrated signings during the offseason was the Browns' ability to acquire Jack Conklin at the tackle position. Cleveland's offensive line was an absolute disaster last year. Mayfield, even though he regressed, a lot of that had to do with the fact that he was running for his life half the time. Even though people were questionable of the Stefanski hire based on that abysmal playoff showing the Vikings had against the 49ers in his last game, that doesn't change the fact that he loves to run the ball and he loves to do a lot of play action passing. And based on that, with an improved offensive line and with Chubb and Hunt, I know how great the receiving core is. Trust Chubb, run the ball, dominate the time of possession, and then open up some deep passes for Odell and Jarvis. And based on that, I actually kind of like this unit, assuming the rest of the offensive line holds up. I think that Conklin addition is huge from a tackle perspective. They might be able to keep Mayfield upright, at least more frequently than last year, which isn't really saying much. But Cleveland, on paper, has a very talented team. And I think you can argue that on paper, they probably have a top 12, top 10 roster. Of course, you're kind of having to swallow a little bit of pride betting the over on the Browns, which is always a tough task based on their track record. But on paper, I like what they did during the offseason, and I actually like their overall roster. And I still think Pittsburgh is going to take a bit of a step back based on the fact that I'm personally skeptical of Roethlisberger's health. I'm assuming Garrett can also stay for all 16 games because I think he's an absolute just menace defensively, not just for the health of others, but for the health of opposing quarterbacks. But for me, I'm going to lean to the over. I do think that Cleveland does have the talent to win 9 games, and I'm going to swallow a little bit of pride here. I think they'll be able to actually surprise some people. Give me the over.
I think they've got the talent in the backfield. I know Stefanski likes to run that zone run scheme that he ran there in Minnesota, and it is a very, very powerful scheme when you're able to get everyone to buy in and run it successful as he ultimately was there with the Vikings. I think if he can get those guys, especially with the I think you're right, bringing in Jack Conklin from the Tennessee Titans was huge. He was the Pro Football Focus number 10 rated offensive tackle in the league last year. I think he's a fine addition and a needed addition to that team. They do have 2 very talented running backs in Hunt and Nick Chubb. So if they can get the buy-in and they can incorporate that zone run scheme that they love to run up there in Minnesota, if they can get that done in Cleveland, I think they do have the weapons to take the pressure off of Mayfield with a good running game. Man,
you're taking the under.
You know what? I'm so tempted. I feel like I'm getting fished into the public play by taking the over. But you guys keep bringing it back to on paper.
It's tough because every year on paper you actually have to play the games. But if you cover the Cleveland Browns title by any type of their page, you'd probably lean over.
Yeah,
but it's just the name itself that makes you think I can't trust this team at all, and I understand that.
You're absolutely right. You look at their body of work and you look at their track record, and of course I'm going to go ahead and drink the Kool-Aid. I'm going to take a slight lean. I'll go with you guys. I'll play the over 8 or 8.5. I think they get to 9 wins, 9 and 7.
Peer pressure.
The weakness of the division with a fading, what we think is going to be a fading Pittsburgh team and a terrible team that we're going to talk about here in a minute, just to the south of Cleveland, down 71. So we'll see what happens there. So let's make it unanimous, barely on the over 8. We're going to play that DraftKings number at over 8 for the Cleveland Browns. All right, so we had to get there eventually. Let's take a look at the Cincinnati Bengals. Bengals win total has been set at -110 for 5.5. Big news is going to be for the Bengals, as they most likely will have the number 1 pick, and that is going to be Joe Burrow from LSU, the owner of arguably the best college football season by a quarterback in NCAA history. What do you think, Scott? Is this the Bengals year, or is the we're going to find out that it was Andy Dalton's problem and it is his fault the whole time that they sucked?
Well, when you say the Bengals year, Marvin Lewis isn't there anymore, so they probably won't go 8-8. I'll tell you that much. But no, overall for the Bengals, DraftKings currently has 5 with juice to the over. I have no interest. I would take the under 5.5 in a heartbeat. Based on the fact that last season, Andy Dalton actually wasn't terrible last year, and the team was still awful. And I know that Burrow had a very phenomenal season last year. You always see some growing pains for rookies based on the speed of the game. They're going to have to adjust. Plus, Cincinnati's offensive line has been a very below-average unit for the last couple of seasons. They still have some talent. I do like mixing out of the backfield. A.J. Green will hopefully be healthy. But at the end of the day, I really just don't see much that gets me excited about this active roster. And I'm going to lean to the under for that reason. I think this team will probably go 4-12, 3-13. There's no games in division that I just go out of my way to say pencil that as a win. And I think that's a massive problem when taking an over with a bottom feeder team. For that reason, I'm going to take the under. I still don't really know what to think of Zach Taylor as a head coach. I'm skeptical, so I'll take the under.
Yeah, I don't hate their defense, especially that defensive line. I think Geno Atkins is one of the more underappreciated guys in the NFL, but I just don't see a lot of weapons, even with Joe Burrow there on the offensive side. They franchised A.J. Green, so he's going to be playing unhappy, and I just don't like any of their other talent as far as their weapons go on the offensive side of the ball.
I think Boyd's okay. I think Boyd's a decent complementary receiver, but I see your point, though.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and there's a possibility that he may turn into a certainly above average. I don't think he's going to be a superstar, but certainly is a good enough compliment to A.J. Green. I just don't see a lot of wins for this team. Joe, do you have any optimism there on the Bengals?
A little bit. Scott Steen, as you said, their defense isn't really all that bad. They just spent so much time on the field last year, and I think their numbers are a little bit deceptive. A.J. Green, if he's healthy, he can be one of the better weapons. Joe Burrow, again, how quickly can he become an NFL quarterback? The quarterback is the single most important position, but it's also the toughest position to evaluate. You've got some of the biggest busts in the history of the NFL, the biggest surprises are at the quarterback position. As you said, Burrow couldn't have done more in college, winning at Alabama and, of course, crushing Clemson. So he proved everything he possibly could have at the college level. I do think that Joe Mixon's a very good running back. I like kind of his physical style, keeps the defense off of the field. When Scott Rochelle, did I pronounce your Scott R? What you were saying about Andy Dalton didn't have that bad of a year. He started out pretty well. I remember watching a lot of the first game when I was at
the Seattle game.
The Seattle game, right? And he was tremendous as far as they were really just short, very efficient. And I'm like, maybe this is what Andy Dalton needs as far as Zach Taylor, but then he seemed to kind of go back to being Andy Dalton after that. So there was some promise early in the season, and he couldn't have had a better debut, even though they wound up losing that game. But then he just regressed to himself. Clearly, with Burrow, the upside is enormous. Is it going to happen this year? That's a big question mark. But having a great weapon like A.J. Green is a pretty good start. But their offensive line is a little bit of a weakness. They're almost certainly going to address that in the draft. And maybe they want to be a little bit cautious and not go with Burrow from the beginning and kind of, just take a couple losses early. So it's one of those things where a lot of the sports books will allow you to bet in season as far as the total. So if their total drops after they get up to an awful 0-3 start, maybe there would be some value in the over. If you're asking me to bet it right now, I guess I would slightly lean towards the over because, again, there is that magic word upside. But I'd probably say look for them to get off to a slow start and then bet the adjusted over.
Yeah, I don't hate that at all. They've kind of had an interesting offseason so far. They brought in basically half of Minnesota's defensive backfield as they signed Trey Waynes and they signed Mackenzie Alexander bringing in 2 cornerbacks there. I would have thought they maybe would lean more on the offensive side of the ball. Guys, I'm with you. I look at the 3 divisions that these teams have to play: the NFC East, the AFC South, and of course their own division there in the AFC North. I don't see a ton of wins there. I just don't see a lot of teams that they're going to be able to top in talent. I think this number is a little high. I like the Bengals under 5.5 at -110. Scott, what does DraftKings have that at?
DraftKings actually has 5, so for the sake of with juice to the over. So for the sake of this, you should probably stick the bet on the line with the under 5.5. But if you want the over 5, it's currently available at -121 on DraftKings.
Yeah, there you go. And it was a little side action here. We'll start with Joe. Joe, what kind of season do you think Joe Burrow ends up having? Give me some stats. Give me some touchdowns. Give me some interceptions. Give me some yards.
Oh boy! As far
Yards?
as for yards, I'm not sure. Like I said, if he will definitely start the season at quarterback, and of course, it really depends on will they have full training camps. If they're not going to have full training camps and they got to kind of rush into the season, I think they'd be crazy to just throw him to the Wolves. I don't know. I'll say. Let's see, 30 touchdown passes, 21 interceptions. It's probably going to be a little bit of a learning curve. And like I said, I don't know if he's going to start every single game. I don't know if I would bet. I don't even know offhand what he is for Rookie of the Year. I probably would not take him for Rookie of the Year, but we'll have to wait until, the draft is over and to see who's on what team before I actually make a pick. But I think they'll probably bring him along fairly slowly.
All right, Scott, what do you think? What are your thoughts on Joe Burrow? Give me a little projection there.
Well, before I actually get into that, just a question for Joe. If there is a shortened training camp in preseason, does that make you more skeptical on taking the over, knowing that they might have to ease Burrow into the playbook, or does that not really play much of a factor?
No, most definitely. That's one of the reasons why I said if you're going to force me to make a pick, I would say over. But I do think, if anything, the Bengals will probably get off to that very sluggish start, and then maybe the adjusted over becomes a very good value. But truthfully, of all the picks we made, I would say Cleveland over and Baltimore under are the two I do like the most. The Steelers and the Bengals both make me a little bit nervous, although, like I said, the adjusted total for the Bengals might be the case. But, yeah, no question, if it's not a full training camp, I think Cincinnati would be fairly crazy to throw him to the Wolves in week 1.
All right, very good. So, Scott, what do you say? What do you say about Joe Burrow? What kind of season does he have?
Season, I think he's going to struggle, but that's mostly just based on the offensive line and the fact that he's going to have most likely a lack of full preparation for the season. The issue you have with the Bengals that if you don't start Burrow immediately, are you really going to throw Ryan Finley out there for the first couple of games? I mean, I was still skeptical when Cincinnati actually benched Dalton in the middle of last season for Finley. Of course, they're mostly just evaluating the talent on the roster just to find out. I think we can agree Finley did not really look like an NFL quality quarterback, maybe an XFL quality quarterback, I don't know. But either or, I think Burrow will probably end up starting immediately just based on the fact that Cincinnati is going to want to do whatever they can to sell tickets and get fans excited about the season. Is it the right move? No. But at the end of the day, you also have to wonder how Burrow will do without Joe Brady's masterful offensive system. He's going to have to learn a new system. You got to wonder how that will work out. I think it'll be hit or miss. I think he'll look very good in flashes, but I think he should end up with – I'm assuming he's going to play roughly 15 to 16 games. So I'll personally put him at around, I'd say, 3,900 yards, 27 touchdowns, 17 picks, something like that.
Yeah, that's kind of close. I was going to say 22 touchdowns, 16 picks. Somewhere in the neighborhood of 3,600 yards. I think he did.
They might feed Mixon the rock just to keep him healthy. That is also something that's worth keeping in mind. But I think Cincinnati's going to get blown out in a decent amount of games, and they're going to have to throw the ball in the second half. So,
absolutely.
And he's got that weapon. Like I said, A.J. Green could be one of the top, 4 or 5 wide receivers in the league if he does return to health. So they got that breakaway speed. And as Scott, you said, they are going to be playing from behind quite often, so he should be able to compile some numbers in the fourth quarter, again, if they do have anything resembling a full training camp.
I like the player prop on Green potentially for receiving yards there. I think that the one thing Green has been missing besides health was the lack of – Andy Dalton was okay, not great. I think Burrow does have a very solid deep ball, and based on how they're by far the worst team in the division, I think you could see a lot of 100-yard games from A.J. Green just solely based on fourth-quarter garbage time. So I think that definitely is an option. You have to wonder about the health, though, but I think that based on the number you can find, that could be a potentially profitable player prop if you look for A.J. Green with yards. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that's a very good situational play. I'm on board with that, Joe. You feel the same way?
Yeah, and he's not going to play very many snaps at all in the preseason, but I think it's very key to see, is he practicing every day? How is he looking in practices? But remember, he wound up taking the whole year off, and I know there were a lot of cases where they thought maybe he'd come back in week 13, 14, 15. I think they were just being extra cautious with him, kind of like, maybe the Philadelphia 76ers did when they were tanking it. Just reading between the lines and the tea leaves, if hypothetically the Bengals were a contender, I think he probably could have returned next year or last year. I don't know that for a fact. And I think they were just really finally said, there's no need to bring him back, to rush him back last year. Let's just get him ready for the 2020 season. So I do think that Green will probably be close to 100%. But again, let's watch him in practice and training camp.
Very good. All right, guys. So just to review here, we all like the Bengals under 5.5. Joe suggests maybe taking a little spin on the in-season over. If they get off to a slow start, there may be some value catching over on the Bengals. We all go over 8 wins for the Cleveland Browns. Me somewhat reluctantly than the other two gentlemen, but we all agree that this may not be the year of the Cleveland Browns. It certainly is the year that they break through and go over 500 for the first time since I don't even know when. It's been a minute, as the kids say. And the Steelers, we all agree there's going to be a little bit of regression there with Ben Roethlisberger especially, and they go under the 9.5. It's available over there at Bet Online. And as far as the Ravens go, I liked the over 11.5, as did you guys as well, correct? Everybody was on.
I like the 11. I know Joe was under on 11.5. I don't know about 11, but okay. I know that Scott and I agreed on over 11, and Joe was on the under 11.5.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So we kind of have a little bit of a split decision there. Very good. And just kind of a bonus question for both of you, real quick: does any team in this division win the AFC Championship? Joe, can the Ravens overtake the Chiefs this year?
Yeah, there's no question. Even though I predicted regression from Lamar Jackson, clearly they've got the weapons there. I still say I'm going to be, a year after everyone else. I think Cleveland is a great dark horse team. I would probably look at them as far as when you're betting lunch money. I wouldn't bet, if you're $1,000 player per game, I wouldn't bet $1,000 on them. But, you want to take a little bit of fun and bet $100 on them to win maybe the AFC or the Super Bowl. This could be their year. But now when I'm predicting Baltimore to go under the total, by no stretch of the imagination do I think that they're going to be some major bust. Of course, if they go to the Super Bowl, I'm not going to be shocked by any stretch of the imagination.
Scott, what do you think? Any surprises coming out of that division? Is Baltimore, what kind of shot do you think they have at the AFC Championship and ultimately the Super Bowl championship?
Well, based on the original question, you said, can anyone in the division? You mean Baltimore. I mean, that's basically what you're asking. I know that Joe was talking about a wild card for Cleveland, and I don't mind that play if you find a very good number. For Baltimore, before I start thinking about them making the Super Bowl, I would like to see Lamar Jackson actually win a playoff game. That's probably a good goal to originally achieve before picking them to play for the Lombardi. They definitely have the talent to do so, but for me, I still think Kansas City is by far the best team in the entire conference. Assuming everybody stays healthy, Baltimore does have the ability to catch teams off guard based on their very unique style of play offensively, and they're very underratedly good defense, especially with Campbell now joining that unit. Of course, they have a chance. They're probably the second favorites to make it, but at the end of the day, I just think Kansas City's better. But we'll talk about them in a couple of days.
All right. Very good, gentlemen. Guys, I appreciate you both being with me here today as we kick off the AFC, taking a look at the North. We'll be back tomorrow to take a look at the South. And, Joe, this would normally be the time when I turn to you and I ask you what you have going on down there at Offshore Insiders, any kind of specials, anything like that. Just to clarify, have you made the transition over to Belarusian soccer or anything from the Korean baseball organization, or are you waiting for the sports here in the States?
No, my site's been dormant, but I will say this. I pretty much decided, and I will say it, I'm definitely going to do it. Obviously it's a crazy time. When sports returns, I am going to offer a package where anything more than a week for a limited time will be doubled. If you want to buy a yearly package, you'll get 2 years. If you want to buy a monthly package, you'll get 2 months. And I'll probably have that on for at least a week. after we return to action, just to get back into the groove for sure.
Oh, that is fantastic. So you guys, everybody out there listening, take your pen, write it down, offshoreinsiders.com. Going to be some serious blowout specials when we return to action. And Scott, what do you got? What's going on over there, buddy, besides catching up on your old movies? Anything at all?
Mostly just playing online poker. I forgot to ask Joe if his system had any plays on video game basketball. So I forgot to ask if that was a possibility. But no, overall, I've already been diving into the draft. I already have some props set up for that. We can end up going over those at some point in the upcoming weeks. But I'm mostly just diving into NFL draft coverage, trying to find any value in the marketplaces. And if I find anything, I'll let you know.
Very good. So, yeah, here's our schedule. We got it roughly sketched out. We're going to finish up the AFC here this week. Maybe take a look at some baseball next week. And then the next week we will turn our attention to the NFL draft, as the draft will be on Thursday. We'll talk a little draft. We'll see if we can even talk draft, maybe even Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. We'll see how that goes with different props. I don't know. That's a lot of space to fill with draft talks, but I think we can actually do it. So for those of you that are wondering what we're going to be doing, that's kind of the schedule that we're taking a look at right now. So for myself, for Mr. Joe Duffy down there in hot Atlanta, for Scott Reichel over in Long Island, and for all of you guys out there, of course, we appreciate you stopping by to join us. Stay healthy, stay safe, stay home. Let's kick this thing in the ass and let's get it finished up and get our sports back so we can get back to life as we know it. I am ready, and I know you guys are too. Once again, thanks for joining us. My name is Scott Steen. For all of us here at winnersandwhiners.com, we appreciate you stopping by. Please leave us some comments in the comment section. Let us know if you agree, disagree with our picks, and whatever you're thinking, whatever you're doing these days. We'd love to hear from you guys. Everyone take care, be healthy, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.